What is a systems thinking person? It's an interesting question and a difficult one to answer because they come in many different forms, different shapes and sizes, and working in different organizations. I think the key thing about a systems thinking person is that they look at the world in a slightly different way. They accept that there are different perspectives on a problem. They understand that there are relationships which are affecting the way people operate, and that there are sort of boundaries that we draw around what we do to make things easier to deal with. And a systems thinking person is able to appreciate that these things exist and to adapt what they do appropriately. And so in that respect, sort of think a little bit out of the box. Systems people can fulfill many different roles in an organization, and you'll find systems thinkers working in all different departments. So for example, I work in training. I'm a training consultant. And I find training is really valuable in what I do because it helps me to look at the way in which I deliver training and how what I do may not actually be the best thing. So what do I mean by that? So organizations have a particular requirement for their staff, and so they want training so that people will behave in a particular way. But people working in an organization who are dealing with clients, who are in systems jargon, working with their environment, interacting with their environment, find that they actually need to adapt what they do on an ongoing basis because the world is complex. The world is difficult to understand. So people working with their clients are constantly changing what they need to do. And training doesn't necessarily adapt them to deal with this complexity. So what I found is that by using a sort of a systems perspective on designing training, I actually come up with training programs which are much better able to help people deal with the complexity of the world that they are working in. Systems thinking people can bring an awful lot to an organization, and that is largely because they can look at the world a little bit differently. So, thinking about the old expression that if you do what you've always done, you get what you've always got. If you think in a conventional way, you will always come up with conventional solutions. Systems people, because they look at the world from a different perspective, can come up with different ideas. They can be more innovative. They can help you to come up with things which you've never thought of before. They can help you to think through the consequences of what you're doing. So one of the big issues that we kind of grapple with in systems thinking is about unintended consequences. What might happen that we don't expect to happen? We do something because we want this to happen, but that may happen as well. So systems thinking offers you a range of tools that you can use to think about the unexpected. I think systems thinking was something I was always interested in. I've sort of dabbled in the ideas of systems thinking for about 30 years since I did a standalone open university course many years ago, but never really understood how it applied, how I could use it to the work that I did. Then at one point I was being asked to put together a training course on management by objectives. And I realized that actually the people who were going to be taking this training really resisted the whole idea of management by objectives. And why they were doing this, I just couldn't understand until I sort of stood back and I looked at it from a systems perspective. And I realized actually the reason why people didn't like the idea of management by objectives was because the objectives that the management wanted them to be meeting weren't the objectives they needed to be meeting in order to keep their clients happy. So there was this kind of fundamental disconnect, and it was only when really that I actually used this principle of systems thinking that I thought that really explains why this training isn't working at the moment. And it helped me to then reframe what I was doing to come up with a training program which was going to be much more effective. Systems thinking is a discipline which people can find very hard to understand. So for example, if somebody asks me, what do I do? And I tell them I use systems thinking to help design training programs, they give me a sort of a somewhat blank look. Or what is systems thinking? And then I start on a long explanation of what systems thinking and how it has helped me and how I use it. The problem is that it then becomes a bit of a dark art. I then become some kind of mystical person who has the key to a dark chamber full of potions that I can pull out and I can use in a particular situation. And I think when you have a situation like that, it always becomes a minority practice. What I would really like, and thinking about the benefits that systems thinking has given me, is to actually make it mainstream, is to make it something which we all do. Because I think that if we were all able to think more systemically, if we were all able to practice these tools that I feel blessed that I actually have, that it would be of great benefit to organizations and to society as a whole.